High Wickham, a country market town some 30 miles to the west of London, which in the past 100 years has developed into a considerable industrial centre. This stream supplied water and power when industries first began to grow up on its banks. It is still useful to the little mill, grinding corn for the farmers. But more up-to-date methods are needed for the bigger factories, paper mills, engineering and radio industries that have come recently to High Wickham. With the new industries, there has come a greatly increased working population. All these people, workers in various occupations and trades, have their trade unions, organizations that safeguard their interests and work for the betterment of their conditions. Among the older established industries of High Wickham is that of chair making, of which the town has been the traditional centre for more than 200 years. In those early days, men worked at this craft in the woods bordering the town. They worked alone, using simple hand tools and a treadle lathe. They were called Bodgers, and there are still a few of them to be seen working today. The modern industry, however, though it uses small quantities of local-grown timber, relies more on imported wood. And the men no longer work alone, or mainly with hand tools. They work as a team, in factories equipped with modern machines, so that hundreds of chairs can be made in less time and with less labor than previously went to the making of one. The work passes through the factory from one department or shop to the next, at each stage undergoing a process of manufacture. All the men working in the factory are free to join their trade union, and the men in each department elect one of their number as a representative or shop steward to speak for them. He is one of themselves, a workman, familiar with the work and knowing all the men in the shop. He is ready at hand to be consulted in case of need. Here, for example, is the steward of the machine shop. This is the steward of the assembly shop. And here, the steward of the finishing shop. And finally, there is Jack Cooper, the chief shop steward. He represents all the workers in the factory. On union matters, he is the link between the workers and the management. The manager has just received a strong complaint from a customer who has returned this chair seat because, after only a fortnight's wear, the covering is breaking away from the frame. On the face of things, this appears to be a case of bad workmanship that reflects on the whole factory, and the manager criticizes the workman who did the job. In the workman's opinion, the fault has arisen because the wood used for the frame of the seat is not entirely suitable. It is from a new type of timber recently imported, and although this timber has been tested in the factory, it may develop unexpected faults in actual use. The workman decides to raise the matter at the weekly lunch hour meeting of union members, which, it so happens, is being held today. He does this to obtain the experience of other workers and get their opinion. These meetings give an opportunity for all the members in the factory to discuss matters affecting them in their daily work. The complaint is discussed by the workmen. There is general support for the view that the wood, rather than the workmanship, is at fault. One of the men shows that the timber previously used holds the tacks firmly. The men also feel that blame should not have been attached to an individual workman for work that had originally been inspected and passed as satisfactory. It is agreed by show of hands that the chief shop steward shall put these points of view to the manager, So Jack Cooper sees the manager that afternoon. He explains what the men feel and demonstrates their point about the timber. On closer examination, the manager agrees that the timber is unsuitable. Although it appeared all right at first, it has clearly not been able to stand up to continued strain. And so the problem is settled amicably between the manager and the workers in this factory. Jack Cooper tells the workmen that the matter has been settled satisfactorily. He will report this to the next meeting of union members. But the trade union is concerned not only with one factory, but with its membership throughout the country. Tonight, Jack Cooper is going to a meeting that will be attended by workers from a number of neighboring factories. On his way there, he has arranged to meet a young worker who has recently joined the union and has not yet been to one of these meetings. It is important that every member on joining should be given a clear idea of what the union is for and be encouraged to take an active part in its affairs. Jack Cooper hands him his membership card, which is a record of his weekly payments. He also gives him a printed book setting out the full constitution and rules of the union. He begins to explain the way in which the union is organized. He tells him that every member of the union who works in a factory is a member of a branch and is entitled to attend the weekly branch meeting that is held in his district. Each branch elects a secretary, chairman, and treasurer to carry out its work. They are voluntary officials. It also elects a delegate or delegates, depending on the size of the branch, to represent them at the annual general meeting. Delegates from other branches throughout the country all attend this meeting to represent the views of their members and to report back to their branch what has taken place. The annual general meeting is the supreme governing body of the union. Here, matters of policy are discussed and settled for the next year. Any decisions made at this meeting will be given to the General Executive Council to carry out. This council is elected by postal ballot of the whole union membership. It meets regularly and deals with all union affairs. To assist it in the day-to-day running of the union, there are a general secretary and 2 assistants. They also are elected by the entire union. These 3 people, although craftsmen, are now paid from the monies received from the union to devote their whole time to union business. To assist them, they have full-time organizers. These are elected by groups of branches. They too are paid from the union dues, as they have to devote all their time to union matters. Thus, the full-time officials are responsible to the General Executive Council, who in turn are responsible to the annual general meeting, and the delegates of that meeting are the spokesmen of the branch members who work in the factories. But now it is time for the new member to see for himself something of how all this works in actual practice. The branch meeting gives an opportunity to meet old friends from other factories. Before the meeting starts, the treasurer has the important task of collecting the union subscriptions, which must be done to keep the union going and ensure its independence. The branch secretary is available to be consulted on any problems that members may have. It is time to start, and the chairman calls the meeting to order. Before getting on to the main business for this evening, the chairman says that he has pleasure in welcoming the new member and introducing him to the branch. The chairman now calls on the secretary to read the minutes of the last meeting. This is a brief account of what took place at that meeting. It must mention any resolutions that were passed and the number of votes recorded for and against. It must be an accurate account, and any errors are corrected now before it is signed by the chairman. When the minutes have been read, the chairman asks whether the meeting accepts them as correct. Their acceptance is proposed and seconded, put to the meeting, and carried by show of hands. The minutes are signed as a true record by the chairman, who then asks if any member wishes to put a question arising from them. This member asks if anything has been done about making a grant from the benevolent fund for an old workmate. The secretary assures him that the grant has been made in accordance with the wishes of the last meeting. Next, the treasurer shows the chairman the week's income and expenditure of the branch. The chairman satisfies himself that the account is correct, initials it, and reports the figures to the meeting. A very important item tonight is the nomination of members who would be prepared to stand for election to the post of full-time organizer for the district. The chairman points out how important it is to choose the right man for this post. He must be a man who will devote himself wholly to the job, as he is a vital link between the branches in this area and headquarters. He must know the industry and all its problems, and indeed, by the rules, he must have worked in it for at least 5 years. He would have to be known as an active trade unionist, not only by his own branch, but by other branches in the area who will be called upon to vote. The appointment will be for a period of 3 years. Several members are proposed and seconded, but not all are willing to stand. They do not wish to give up their normal jobs. Jack Cooper is nominated for the post and receives warm support. He has not made up his mind whether he really wants to take it, but for the present is willing to let his name stand. The chairman reminds the meeting that other branches in the area will be sending in their nominations to headquarters before the election is held. At headquarters, before the ballot papers are prepared, the General Secretary, the Chief Executive Officer of the Union, writes to each candidate to make sure he is still prepared to allow his name to go forward for election. Back in High Wickham the following evening, it is getting near the time when Jack Cooper can be expected home from work. His wife hopes that he has not been delayed by one of the many meetings he has to attend as a shop steward. Tonight he is home punctually. He finds waiting for him a letter from the General Secretary sending him the nomination form on which he must say whether or not he wishes to stand for election as district organizer. It is not easy to decide. He has a good job at the factory. With his bonuses, he brings home a good wage. If he is elected, he will be paid a fixed salary by the union. Already, his spare time is much occupied with union work. The job of district organizer would mean even less time at home. But he is prepared to undertake it if elected. The acceptances for nomination are returned to the head office. But the election is not conducted by the union or any of the union officers. The names of the candidates for the post, together with a list of all the members in the branches in that district, are taken to a firm of chartered accountants. The accountants are independent of the trade union and are members of a professional body of high standing. Their duty is to supervise the ballot and ensure that it is properly conducted. They arrange the printing of the ballot papers, and it is their responsibility to see that one is sent to the home address of every member in the district. So each member receives his own ballot card, on which he places a cross against the name of the candidate whom he wishes to be elected. The cards must be returned to the accountants within a stated time. There the votes are counted, and the result is notified to the General Secretary. In this way, the ballot is completely secret. No one in the Union, not even the General Secretary himself, has any means of knowing who voted for whom. The result of this ballot is that Jack Cooper is elected as the new organizer for the district. He will no longer be their shop steward. For the next 3 years, he will not be working at his bench. But he will be in touch with the members and their jobs more than ever. He now works in the Union's district office. He must give his attention to a much wider field of trade union activity that will include not only his old factory, but all the others in his area. One of the most important of his duties concerns the training of apprentices. The training scheme, agreed with the employers, provides for boys to attend technical classes 2 half-days a week during working hours. Cooper has to ensure that managers give the boys the necessary time off and that the boys do attend the classes. He explains how necessary it is to attend these technical training classes. He points out that not only will it help the boy to learn his job more quickly, but he will get a better idea of the various kinds of work done in the furnishing trades. Many boys think that when they go to work, they have finished with school. But to do something of both makes learning more interesting and work more exciting. Moreover, it is realized that to raise the standard of skill among members of the union is one way to ensure greater prosperity in the industry and better wages. Cooper and the manager have now convinced this boy that to attend these technical classes will be in his own interests. Day after day, the organizer has occasion to visit the factories in his area, keeping in touch with the men and their problems, and maintaining close contact with the managements. He thus keeps himself thoroughly informed on the state of the industry, its progress and prosperity. The union is always interested in new methods of production or factory organization that will enable output to be increased, the industry to prosper, and the workers ultimately to benefit. Once a year, delegates from all branches throughout the country attend the annual general meeting, the governing body of the union. Jack Cooper is the delegate from his branch. Here, the union officers report on the year's work, and the delegates bring forward for discussion resolutions from their branches. The branch secretary, whom we have already seen, has been elected chairman for this meeting. Delegates wishing to speak ask permission of the chairman, whose responsibility it is to see that all opinions get a hearing before a resolution is voted upon. The big issue at the moment is whether the union shall put forward a claim for an increase in wages. Pressmen are there to report the proceedings to the public. Some delegates have doubts as to whether the time is opportune. Others say the employers, for their part, will never consider any time opportune for increasing wages. One delegate points out that a wage increase will inevitably be followed by increased prices of furniture, making it more difficult to sell. Others argue that an increase is essential because prices have risen and the basic wage rate for their members is unfavorable compared with wages generally. Another says that the productivity of the industry has increased and wages could rise without prices rising. Many points of view are argued for and against the proposal, and particular attention is paid to the advice of the General Executive Council. At length, the delegate moves that the discussion be closed and the question put to a vote. This is accepted by the chairman, who calls upon all those in favor of the motion to hold up their voting cards. These are counted by the tellers. Each card bears a number representing the voting strength of the branch. Owing to the importance of the question, it is essential for the voting to register the full strength of opinion represented. When the votes in favor have been counted, the chairman calls for the votes against the motion, and these also are counted. The result of the voting is passed to the chairman, who announces that there is a large majority in favor of pressing forward the wage claim. The resolutions of the annual general meeting now come before the General Executive Council, whose duty it is to carry them into effect. On the question of the wage claim, the Executive instructs the General Secretary to approach the Secretary of the Employers' Federation to inform him of the terms of the resolution and to arrange with him that it shall be discussed at the next meeting of the Joint Industrial Council of the whole industry. This council consists of an equal number of representatives from the employers and the trade union. It meets from time to time to consider matters of general interest to the industry. The duties of chairman are undertaken by a member who is elected from either side alternately. This meeting is concerned with the wage claim. The Employers' Federation has considered the proposals carefully, first in its local branches and then in its national council, just as the trade union has, and is ready to give a reasoned answer. The employers do not consider a rise in wages is justified. The industry cannot afford it, they say. Profits are not high, and markets are uncertain. The union representatives press their case based on the arguments put forward at the annual general meeting. No agreement can be reached. Both sides stand firm. The matter seems to be at a deadlock. The situation looks serious, and it might result in labor troubles that would adversely affect the industry. But the chairman pleads for a spirit of conciliation and compromise. Individual members make suggestions. These are discussed to see if a compromise solution is possible. And eventually, a basis for a settlement is found that is accepted by both the employers and the union. Thus, the trade union, through its elected council and officers, safeguards the interests and well-being of its members, plays a considerable part in developing the industry from which they draw their livelihood, and takes an important and responsible place in public affairs. And its strength lies in the right of each member freely to cast his vote and have his say in deciding the issues that arise.